Phasors are about to get so much less confusing. Hear me out. There are several basic types of phasors. We have one-dimensional phasors, which are basically phasors that only move on or off, more or less of a value. And then we have two-dimensional phasors, which involve pan and tilt. So pan is one dimension and tilt is the other dimension. In other words, one-dimensional phasors are everything except for position, and position phasors are two-dimensional. So in our phasor editor, we're going to have a specific way to look at two-dimensional phasors, which is unique. Now in this video, we are not going to talk about two-dimensional phasors. I'm going to save that for the next video. But in this one, we are going to go over all of the basics of everything you need to know to get started with one-dimensional phasors. So I'm going to start by showing you the phasor editor, all of the different attributes that a phasor has, and then we're going to go over a couple of examples of how to make one-dimensional phasors. For this video, we are only going to be using dimmer attributes just to make things simpler. After the two-dimensional phasor video, I may go back and make another one on colors, and maybe we'll also hit zoom. Maybe we'll do a color and zoom phasor video. So let me know if you'd be interested in that. But for now, what is a phasor? Well, a phasor is anything with automated attribute changes. The reason a phasor is called a phasor is because it's phasing between two or more steps. So you have single step presets, which are simply a static value, or you can set your fixtures to phase between one value and another value, or more. You can have up to, I think, 36 steps without checking. I've never gone anywhere near the limit, so I don't have any experience with that. But now we're going to look at how to create a phasor. We're starting from nothing. We don't have a phasor. What do? I've pulled up a view with my 3D right here, my phasor editor here. We'll talk about that in a minute. And I have my encoder bar down here. So I'm going to select a group of lights. We're going to go with this one. I will explain later a little bit more about why we're using a linear selection. All right, so now we have our spot selected. I'm going to select my dimmer attribute, select the first step and set it to 100. Okay, now my lights are on. We now have them at a single step value. Duh. So then we click on this little button over here, which says go to the next step. Now that we're on the next step, I'm going to click on this and hit 0. And now we have a phasor. The lights are phasing from step 1 to step 2. Now, one important thing to keep in mind is your last step is actually treated as step 0. So that's why it's showing step 2 here before step 1. It's going to basically say that step 1 is the first step you're going to, meaning that your lights are starting with step 0, so to speak, but it's actually step 2 in this case. So we can see that kind of visually put here, and we can see the lights are over here doing the phasor, but they're all doing it together. Now, a lot of the times when you're running a phasor, you don't want all the lights doing it together. So how do we make sure that they all do them separately? Well, you're going to have to give them phase values. So phase is an attribute in the phasor, and the easiest way to change this is to go over here to phasor overall, select phase, and then right here, you're going to click on this, and you can select any one of these. If you give it a single value, they're still going to all be doing it together. So phase value should always be something through something, and 0 through 360 is the full spectrum. So we're going to go to there, and now they are going, and they're evenly spread out across the 0 through 360 of the phase. We could also do 0 through 180, then they would all go, and there would be a longer break before they start again. The order in which they do it is dependent on how they're selected in the selection grid and on a matrix. And that is a much more complicated topic that we'll have to go into in another video, which I do plan to do immediately after this phasor series. But the most basic thing you need to know, because a lot of the times you're probably going to want them shuffled, is let's go to a matrix. I'm going to click shuffle. It gives them a random shuffle. And now, in order to apply that, we have to reapply this. So I'm going to go 0 through 360. And now they're kind of randomly doing that. So that is how you create a most basic phasor of 0 to 100. Now let's take a look at the phasor editor. So for right now, I'm going to go ahead and clear out. I'm going to start over and create this same phaser from scratch. Again, only not applying the phase. We're just going to have the 100 to 0. We have no other values assigned. All right, now we're going to take a look at the phaser editor. So phaser editor in this case is a permanent window. You can open it like this, saying under common, click that. Now it opens automatically to this auto mode, which is for some reason, I don't know what auto is supposed to do because it always opens to, I guess it's scrollable and it does, it looks like it has a 1D down here, but I don't know how to separate this, so not quite sure what's going on with that. But you can choose between auto or 2D. And I've totally, okay, there we go. Or 2D. 2D view is not useful for anything besides position phaser, so we're going to ignore it. We're going to go to 1D, and this is the same one I had pulled up before. Or you can also use the sheet view, which shows you the sheet with data and also the 1D. This is a lot of times the easiest one to work with. Another thing I will say is you can pull up a temporary phaser editor like this, and then you have the same options. But for the sake of being able to see our 3D view and encoder bar, we are going to stick with this one for now. So let's go over the options that we have in here, right? On this side, we have our tools, and some of these only apply to two-dimensional phasers, which means we're going to skip over them and hit them in the next video. But the ones that do apply to 1D phasers are going to start with this one right here, select. This one just lets you select a step. So you can select a step, and then you can make changes to it. Now this bar down here is called the step bar, and it also lets you turn on and off the selection of steps. You can select all steps with this button, it's a toggle, or with this one. And if you have multiple steps, then obviously you can do that. These buttons will also go back and forth between them rather than clicking one and then deselecting the other. So that is useful. These two are only for your two-dimensional phaser, so we're going to ignore them. This one right here lets you move points. So this one let you select them, but now you can move them. So you can grab one and change it, and up and down is the value. And that's the only direction we can move it. We can't move it side to side with this, but we can move it up and down, so we can change the high value or the low value, whatever we want. The next one is this one right here, which is move handles. And this one is going to pull up these little handles, and you can change them, and they adjust Accel and Decel values. They adjust kind of the curvature of the transition. I'm not going to go into that right now. We're going to come back to what those values do and how they work, but just know you can manually manipulate them with these in the editor. This button right here will reset them, so I click that. And now we're going to skip this because it only applies to 2D. And this one, the same thing. This one right here is change phase. So it changes the toolbar over here, and it's just a quicker way to apply different phase values. So you can apply the 360. You can apply 0 to 360 by clicking on this one, because it doesn't say 0 through 360, but that's what it's doing. And you can see that here pretty clearly too. This one right here changes width. So it's going to let you change the width of a step. It's not going to let you do it by selecting in the window. What it does is it changes this to different values, and 200 is the default. I'll be honest, it's a little bit confusing because it's not changing the width values the normal way, which lets you change each one individually. Normally width is a step value, which means you're not changing it for the phaser overall. But in this particular case, this is changing both equally. So if you set it to 33, it's going to set each of them to half of that amount. 200 is setting each of them to 100%, which is the default. This could be useful if you are going to add another step for the remainder of the width, but it's of negligible overall use, in my opinion. So there's that. Then the next one we're going to talk about is form. Form is going to overwrite your Accel, Decel, and transition values and apply a basic form. So you have this one, which is a pop, obviously. This one is just a linear. This is a sine, and this one is also going to look like a sine if you're dealing with these values. Actually, it might just not do anything if you're doing a 1D phaser. It's specifically for 2D phasers. So we'll leave that be. And then the next one is speed. So speed is just going to give you these tools to have or multiply or divide speed values that you currently have. So your speed value is going to be a number of BPM or hertz or seconds, depending on your show file settings. I have it to BPM. And you can select any of these and it's going to multiply or divide whatever the current value is. Loop is, I think, speeding it up. I think it's multiplying it. And fixture is dividing the current thing by the total number of fixtures. So, there ought to be a quick reset button for this, and it does not appear that there is, so that's kind of dumb. But I can click on it and set it to 60, which is the default. Now we're back to the way we were, albeit with a whole bunch of values in the programmer, but whatever. So that was it for the tools on the left side. Now we are going to go over some of the things on the right side whenever you have some of these main ones selected. So unless you have something that's specifically giving you specific tools over on the right side, we're going to have these basic things. So this resets spline. This one deletes a step. This one cuts a step and puts it on the clipboard. And it's all the programmer values for that step. And then this one copies to the clipboard and this one pastes from the clipboard. I don't know what it is, but those icons really confused me for the longest time. I used to think they were like stamp tools or something, like you're picking up the value. That's what it looks like. It looks like a handle of, it looks somewhat like a hammer, okay? I finally figured out that if you look closely, these are arrows. It's pointing an arrow to a clipboard, and this one is an arrow from a clipboard. So that's how you know which is which. In my opinion, they surely could have come up with better icons for this because it's extremely confusing, but whatever. I finally did figure it out. Now, several of these only apply to 2D phasers, but this one right here is called mirror time, and it inverts the steps. So it switches step 2 to step 1 and vice versa. And I believe that is it. Yep, that's all the ones on this side that apply to one-dimensional phasers. So now we're going to talk about the sheet cells and the encoder bar. The sheet cells right here are obviously giving you columns for each step. You can add more steps. If you add a value here, it will add a whole column and change this. And then you have your absolute relative fade delay, your speed, speed master, all these things. And these are all editable. As you can see, you can just click on them and change them. You can easily see what you have in your phaser with this view. It's really, really helpful for that. So then the other thing is obviously the encoder bar, because you don't have to use the phaser editor for most of this. I mean, really and truly, you don't have to use it for any of it. I can tell you that for sure. I actually don't use the phaser editor anywhere near as much as I probably should, because you can do it all in the encoder bar. So come down here and we can see, obviously we assigned it values. We created our phaser originally in the encoder bar, but we can go to this phaser overall tab and then we have the options for speed, speed master. This would be tying it to a specific speed master so that when you adjust that speed master, it adjusts the speed accordingly. Now the way that works is basically speed master at 60 equals whatever speed you have in the speed layer, and then increasing or decreasing that adjusts the speed you have in the speed layer accordingly. So if you want your speed master to be going at the exact speed of the song and have that be the right number of beats, then you would want your speed to be the right division of 60 to make that look right. So I'll let you do the math on that. I hope that made sense. The next one we have is phase, and then we have measure, which I'm going to talk about exactly what that does in a couple of minutes here. And then under phaser steps, we have Accel, Decel, transition, and width. And that also is going to come into our next discussion. The reason these tabs are separate is because the phaser overall applies to the whole phaser. This is a phaser as a whole setting, whereas your phaser steps button is going to only adjust that value for the current step. And that's why I was saying it's a little strange that the width up here is adjusting all of them, because normally in the encoder bar, width only adjusts the current step. So now we've gone over how to change everything. What if we talked about what it means and what it does when you change all of these things? What do the settings actually do? Well, first off, let's clear out the programmer and start over with that. So I'm going to select my same lights again. We're going to start with 100%, and then we're going to go to 0%. And now we have our phaser running. What are we going to do? We are going to make a basic standard sine phaser. So to do that, here's one thing. If you come from MA2, you're probably familiar with the workaround of putting a negative value in your low value so that your lights are off for more time than they're on. MA3 does not let you do this. Now, technically, you could combine relative and absolute values. I do not advise doing that. But the reason why we don't have that workaround in MA3 is because MA3 gives us a way to achieve that without needing a workaround. So, you want your lights to be off for more time? No problem. I got you. Let's do this. First off, let's go ahead and do a phase 0 through 360. Actually, I'm also going to shuffle these and start that over again. All right, now we have our lights dimming, but we want more negative space. We want the lights to be off for longer. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I want my second step, or yes, the second step is 0. I want my second step to have a greater width. This means that it will hold at the second step for longer. So I'm going to change the width of this step to, let's say 125. This is a percentage. So you can see now it's kind of weird because our total width is no longer 2. And what I would advise doing is either changing this to 75, which obviously does achieve that, or another thing you can do is just set the measure to 2. Measure always shows up in the first column of the sheet view because it's a phaser overall value. So our overall measure is now set to 2. Now it does not matter what else we change. It is going to force these to live in 2 measures. And it does a little bit of weird things sometimes to try and do that. Like if I set this to 100, it's going to move it over slightly, but we're still getting more negative space. You can see this isn't quite whatever. Because it's so complicated, I prefer to just not give a value. So this is 125. This is going to be, it looks like 90. Honestly, some aspects of this are a little bit much, but at any rate, we have our width for step 2 set to 125. We have our width for step 1 now less than that. And I don't know if you notice, but the transition for each of these steps is what's taking up all of the time. They're not actually living at 0. They're not actually living at 100. Presumably, we don't want them to live at 100. We want them dimming off and on, but we do want them to stay at 0 for less than, a fraction of a second. So to do that, we're going to have to change our transition. And that means a little bit of math. So we need our transition to be basically half of the amount of the width. If we want this transition to be the same duration as this one, we need to have the transition be 50% of this. Transition is also a percentage. So our transition, if our transition is 100%, it's going to be the entire duration. It's currently 100%, right? So we want it to be 50% of 125%. And of course, you can use the calculator for that. So we can do 125 divided by 50, or sorry, not divided by 50, divided by 2. Please, and now it sets to 62.5. And these transitions look the same. Actually, I think this should say 75% because it's doing weird stuff to keep the measure at 2 otherwise. So this does need to be 75 to actually make this line up. So we have going to 100, coming back down. Those transitions are the same amount. This one is 100% of 75, and this one's 62.5% of 125, but it's the same value. You could do the math. It would be the same. So it's the same amount of time, and then they're staying at 0, and we have a gorgeous effect with lots of negative space. Now, what if we want to make this a sine? Because I said we're doing a sine effect, and this is not a sine. This is a linear dimmer. Well, the easiest way to start that is to go over here and click on this button. Now it's a sine. It did destroy our transition values, so let's go back to 62.5 for that. And now it's a nice smooth sine with all of that going on. Now, what makes it a sine? That would be our Accel and our Decel values. So it's set all of these to negative 100% for this. And if we change this to 100, now we have a very different shape here. I'm going to explain exactly what these are doing because I don't want to confuse you. It feels a little bit confusing, but it's not actually that bad. So I'm going to go back to linear. That's going to be easier. And I'm also going to change this back because that just also feels easier. Okay, we have our very basic effect here. So currently, Accel and Decel are both 0, which means the lights are going straight from the one value to the other value. We want to see our lights ease in and then ease to the top, right? Accel is how we're coming out of the step. Decel is how we're going into the step. So if I change, I think it's going to be easier to see if I change step 2. So I'm going to change the Accel for step 2 to 100. Again, this is how we're coming out of the step. So step 2 is 0. So coming out of 0, we're speeding up really fast. We're going faster than 0, 100% faster than 0. So we're coming out really fast. And then our decel into step 1 is going to influence this part. So if I change this to 100, then now we've got this woof, woof, right? And we can make that really, really dramatic if we wanted to. Maybe if we do 400 and then 400 here, now it's doing this whole curve thing because it's accelerating super fast, but then it has to decelerate super fast to get to the next one. So it's really wild. I'm going to reset this one to, I'm going to go to negative 100. Oops, that was relative. By the way, if you didn't know, if you put a negative and then don't remove the space in the calculator, it's relative value. So it's relative to whatever was previously there. Okay, so negative 100 there, negative 100 here, and now we have a sign on that side, and then again, it's the same kind of deal on the other one. The Accel is how it's coming out of step 1, and the decel for step 2 is going to be how it's going into step 2. So we've got that, and now I hope that made it really clear how Accel and Decel work. But we are going to move on to doing another type of effect because obviously there's more to show you. So if you've ever worked in MA2, you probably have heard this effect called a ramp minus. I don't know what other people tend to call it. I always, question if I should use that terminology, but it's not inaccurate. So a ramp minus is where the lights pop on and then fade out. And it's very simple to make, I promise. It's like a lot simpler than the sign, right? All right, so we're going to set our first step to 100, second step to 0. I'll go ahead and do the shuffle-o-matrix and phase 0 through 360. Now, let's see. If we want to pop, I'm going to say the first step is going to be just set it to that. Obviously, you could just change the transition, but we have our transition at 0. Then we want it to go to step 2 over the course of the whole duration. So we do that. Now it pops on, fades out. So setting the transition to 0 makes it a pop. Basically, that's about all there is to it. just to make this a little smoother, I'm going to turn this side into a sine rather than a linear. So again, I'm going to go ahead and change these values. -100, -100, and now we have a nice little sine on this side, so they're popping in, fading out. Let's make it a little more complicated and change it so the low value holds for longer. So we're going to change this to 125, and then we'll change this one. Whoops, I hit the wrong button. This one's width to 125, and this one's can be 75. And then I need to change this transition to 62.5. And now we have a very nice looking ramp minus effect where it is popping on, fading off in a nice sine, staying out for a little minute, and then popping back on again. And you can align this to your speed because you have an even number of measures here. That's a very important thing to do. I like to keep my phasers at 2 measures. You could do 4, you could do 1, but don't do partial measures because it makes aligning them to the beats in the songs more complicated. So I think I've covered everything that this video needs to cover. If I missed something, let me know. I'll see if I can make it into one of the other videos. The next one is going to be about 2-dimensional phasers. Specifically, we're going to be talking about pan tilt because that's the only type of 2-dimensional phaser. So we're going to be getting into this exciting editor and all that stuff. So make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't so that you can make sure to not miss the next video because honestly, it is going to make position phasers a lot easier. Thanks for watching. Have a great week and happy programming.